I want to begin this video by saying how much thankful I am for every single one of you. We have absolutely incredible community built here, and it wouldn't be possible without you. So if you've been watching my previous video, you know that I've been demonetized, and in the last 4 to 5 days I've been in a very dark place. I was thinking to obviously quit YouTube and all these kind of things, but after seeing your comments, after seeing your support, this is just meaningless right now. Like, come on, this is like, it's not about YouTube and its unexplainable, ridiculous monetization policies. It's about you and me. It's about me producing content for you, making it interesting, making you stay up to date. And without you, I wouldn't be here where I am right now. I could never imagine this level of, I don't know if you want to call it success on YouTube. And so once again, it's all thanks to you, not YouTube, no nothing like this. It's all thanks to you watching my videos, sharing them with your friends, being here with me every single day. You made me the Russian dude on the internet, on YouTube. And yeah, right now I know I'm the Canadian dude, and there's a story behind this, and hopefully within the next couple of weeks I can get back to the Russian dude. But I will explain it a little bit later what happened and what's the reason behind this. And by the way, next week I have a week of special mini episodes for you, explaining, just basically sharing my story being a Russian in this world. And I'm really excited to share this mini series with you, so stay tuned and hopefully you will get a little bit better insight into my mind, inside me being Russian abroad. Let's call it like this, okay? As for now, I'm still being demonetized like I mentioned, but I will keep making videos. It's not about YouTube, it's about you, my dear community. And so right now, let's get back to the video, because that's what we all came here for. So let's begin. The Grand Withdrawal of Russians from the south has just entered the second stage. And besides leaving Kherson region, Russians are now most likely will abandon Zaporozhye as well. And in case this happens, in the near future, Russia will only be left with Donbass region and Crimea. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian Canadian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage, or at least the one which I'm still allowed to show on YouTube. And first of all, right here we can see a cat which is warming up on one of the Starlink satellite dishes. The winter in Ukraine is coming, it is obviously getting cold, so that's why some stray animals, they look for every opportunity to warm themselves. And so Ukrainian cats found the solution, but unfortunately it started blocking the signal from the Starlink internet. Then we go to Vinnytsia, and as you can see from this picture, a person has built his own water windmill, I guess that's the name for this, which generates electricity. The creator also mentioned that he started building this small hydro plant back in May, and it costed him approximately 10,000 Ukrainian hryvnias, which is approximately $270 US. It obviously will not be able to generate massive amounts of electricity, but according to him, it is way more than enough to charge small electronic devices. Next we go to Kharkov, and as you can see right here, the local authorities started decorating the subway stations for an upcoming Christmas and New Year. The next video is somewhere from allegedly the territory of Russia, and as you can see right here, Russian soldiers cannot even bring their military vehicles to Ukraine. What basically happens is whenever they try to unload the armored personnel carrier, it just literally rolled over. And speaking about Russia, here we have another satellite image from Engels Airport, located in Saratov region. And what we can see is that Russians were using their soldiers, or maybe some other military equipment, to send the message to this satellite. And what it basically says is that all the Nazis should be eliminated, and this is just me trying to be politically correct on YouTube to avoid further demonetization. But what they also forgot, that the satellite image also captured the location of their fighter jets and bombers. And quoting one of the famous modern music creators, or someone like DJ, I want to say that congratulations Russians, you played yourself. But okay, because then we go to Bryansk region, where reportedly a Russian military base has been targeted. The Ministry of Defense of Russia claims that the reason for this loud noise was the work of Russian air defense system. But just by looking at the footage of the consequences, we can see a pretty big crater next to military vehicles. And I mean, I wish I was able to show you this actual footage, but because of these YouTube monetization policies, I'm no longer able to do it in order to try and be safe. That is why I uploaded some of it to my Discord, and the rest will be available on my Patreon. And if you want to see all these extra photos and videos from today's episode, as well as show the financial support to my channel, the links will be down below. But pretty much yes, as you already know, these attacks of Ukrainians against Russian military targets on the territory of Russia is the logical response for Russians massively attacking the territory of Ukraine in the past. And even though the shelling by Russians decreased recently, according to the speaker of the Ukrainian Air Force, Yuri Ignat, Russians most likely started using the second batch of Iranian drones. But at the same time, according to him, these last two drones were reportedly launched from the eastern side of Azov Sea from Krasnodar region. The alleged place of the initial launch is located approximately in this area, and as you can see, it definitely means that Russians are moving further and further from the front lines. And we will talk more in details about Russians retreating from the south very soon. Because right now, since we started talking about Iran, it looks like that they will not be fully executing on their promises to deliver the next batches of missiles to Russia. And what I mean by that is that Fatih 110 with the range of 300 kilometers will be most likely limited in its capabilities before Iran sends it to Russia. And the reason for this, it is because Iran does not want to breach the guidelines established by the United Nations. And then Zolfagar missiles with the range of up to 700 kilometers will most likely not be delivered to Russia at all. And just when you thought that it was already pretty bad for Russia in terms of ammunition, believe me, it can get worse. Because according to this article, Russia will most likely use most, if not all of its ammunition supplies in the beginning of next year. And one of the potential reasons for this, it is because already right now there is evidence that Russians are using the ammunition which was created more than 40 years ago. And even though the number of Russian attacks decreased recently, you should still exercise caution whenever there are air raid sirens. And then according to the President Zelensky, he also urged the European Union to send its representatives on Ukraine's energy infrastructure to stabilize the situation. And one of the potential ways how they can allegedly do this is that Russians will no longer risk to attack these objects since there will be representatives of another countries. And to be honest, this plan is already in work in some way, because according to the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal, the International Atomic Energy Agency will send its representatives to every single nuclear power plant in Ukraine. And you know what? The reaction of Russia was pretty much expected. Because according to Dmitry Medvedev, who called President Zelensky a bloody clown, he said that he is planning to use these European Union representatives as a human shield. But if you think about this, just by making this statement, Russia basically acknowledged that they do attacks against energy and civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. And then at the same time, the Russian authorities are talking about people using as a human shield, which to be honest, does sound familiar like tactics of one of the countries. Don't you think so? But anyways, hopefully the energy crisis in Ukraine will get at least a little bit better in the near future, because according to this article, America already sent its first batch of the energy infrastructure equipment worth of $13 million. At the same time, reportedly all the nuclear power plants in Ukraine, which are still under the control of Ukraine, they are now being operational. But nevertheless, the Russian propagandists are still trying their best to extract at least some sense of victory from even the most minor and ridiculous details. Such as, for example, the main infiltrator of Russia in Donetsk region, Denis Pushilin, the defeat of Ukraine is extremely close. And the main reason for this, he says, is that the energy infrastructure in Ukraine is in critical condition and it creates a big division in the population of Ukraine. But what he does not realize is that these attacks, in reality, they in fact unite Ukrainians against Russians even more. And it is Ukraine which has been liberating massive amounts of its territories in the last several months, while Russia is struggling to advance even several hundreds of meters in the east, despite the fact that they sent thousands of soldiers in this region. But okay, and now let's really quick talk about this unexpected increase in military activity on the territory of Belarus. And while I'm going there, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel if you like this style of daily updating. You can also follow me on Instagram because in the next several days I'll be hopefully posting many more stories. Alright, and now let's go back to Belarus, because today, according to the Ministry of Defense of this country, they suddenly decided to do a check for military readiness. What it basically means is that several military units which are extremely close to the borders with Ukraine will have to relocate to predetermined areas and do some military exercises. And among such exercises is the emergency relocation itself, the installation of engineering equipment and practicing to cross the river. One of the first military units in Belarus which was given this order was located in Brest, which as you can see is right on the border with Ukraine. And for their quote-quote training purposes, they were told to move to Malarita. Another military unit which has been ordered to do pretty much the same was located in Vitebsk. And they were told to go to Brest region, which as you can see right here, is pretty much across the entire country. This information has been confirmed by the Belarusian authorities, and many military convoys were spotted today on the roads. And as you can see from this picture, which shows the relocation of just one of such military units, Belarus forces were bringing with them the armored personnel carriers, mortars, radio and engineering equipment, ambulances, and other military equipment. I personally do not believe that there will be any sort of escalation because of this, and yeah, most likely these are just quote-quote the military trainings. Because if you take a look at this map and okay, let's assume that Russians and Belarus forces will invade Ukraine from this side, they will be as far as possible from the other front lines. Which basically means in case this craziness does indeed happen, the reaction of Ukrainians will be immediate and they will push the invaders away from its territory. Alright, and before I give you crucial updates from the south, let's really quick talk about the situation in the east. And first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians continue to increase its defensive measures in the border between Kharkov and Luhansk region. They also attempted several attacks along Svatove-Kreminny road, but Ukrainians were far more successful. And so at the same time, as always, the main focus of Russians in the east was concentrated next to Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Donetsk city. And unfortunately it has been mentioned that the situation around Bakhmut for Ukrainians became just a little bit worse. But at the same time, all the most recent attacks of Russians next to Avdiivka and Marinka has been successfully and fully repelled by Ukrainians. And now let's really quick take a look at the changes in territorial control in the last 24 hours. And our first stop brings us to Vuhledar region, where we can see that Ukrainians were able to push Russians a little bit further. Next we go to Bakhmut itself, and as you can see right here, Russians were able to get a little bit closer to the east of this city. And yes, I do mean it, a little bit closer. And then, as we move to the north, we can see that Ukrainians were able to liberate more territory on the border between Kharkov and Luhansk regions. And now, please let me give you the same update from the south and at the same time mention a couple of very interesting news. And first of all, according to the same report by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainians continue to target the Russian military assets, as well as the logistics along the main roads in Kherson region. And if you remember from my yesterday's episode, Russians already started to dig trenches on Crimean Peninsula in anticipation for Ukraine's arrival. And once again, according to the same report, Russians most likely do not have sufficient infrastructure to support their troops in Crimea at this very moment. Which, to be honest, if true, is a huge news for Ukrainians in their upcoming counteroffensive. And well, here is one of these interesting news from the south for you. Because according to the main infiltrator of Russians in Kherson region, Vladimir Saldo, Russians will try to build a new city next to Khinichensk. And according to him, they'll be trying to compete with Mariupol, which is also now being rebuilt by Russians. He then also mentioned that the ultimate goal will be to create this resort area, which will last all the way from Khinichensk to Mariupol. And this will include the construction of the residential buildings, hotels and roads, both for regular cars and trains. And I mean, probably this is one of these few cases when I can genuinely wish a good luck to Russia, because as soon as Ukraine retakes these cities, they'll have a nice surprise. But okay, back to serious updates. As you might already know, slowly but surely, Russians are withdrawing from Kherson region, and the main directions of such retreats is to go to Crimea, deeper inside Kherson region, and to Zaporozhye. Russians are also preparing to ultimately bring their military bases further away from the front lines, and at the same time, like mentioned previously, the defense preparations of Crimea are on the way. Which simply means that in one way or another, the liberation of the rest of Mykolaiv and Kherson region will take place in the near future. And speaking about this retreat in general, the Grand Withdrawal of Russians from the south has most likely just entered the second phase. Because first of all, according to the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, there are preliminary agreements between Russia and the International Atomic Energy Agency to remove the heavy Russian military equipment from the territory of Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. And in case this is true, which most likely it is because this is not the first time I hear this news, the Russians will most likely complete their withdrawal from Enerhodar and its surrounding areas, most likely to Melitopol. And long story short, there is a big possibility that we will see these territories to be liberated in the near future as well. And this is where it gets even more interesting, because if you remember the last several weeks, Ukrainians have been showing the signs of increasing their combat activities in this area, specifically against Tokmak. We also have several reports of partisan activity in Melitopol and loud noises. Such as, for example, this one of the main bridges in Melitopol, which has been recently targeted. This bridge was used by Russians to move around their military vehicles around the south of Ukraine, and according to the preliminary information, the bridge supports were the ones to be targeted, which caused the bridge to partially collapse. But I mean, if you just think about it, the destruction of the bridges is one of the first earliest signs of an upcoming counteroffensive. Just remember that the same thing was happening against bridges in Kharkov, Kakhovka and Kherson regions earlier this year. Because pretty much yes, the first step in the preparations for an upcoming counteroffensive is to destroy the enemy's military targets from the distance. And this is exactly what Ukraine has been doing in the last several weeks in this Zaporozhye area. The next step would be to disrupt the logistics of the enemy, such as bridges. On the one hand, this will make the resupply of the enemy much harder, and at the same time, this will have a psychological effect on the soldiers. Because right now, they started to understand that as soon as Ukrainians start approaching fast, and trust me, they will, the withdrawal of Russians will be much slower, due to, for example, the absence of crucial bridges. And this assumption has also been confirmed by this article, which states that the next massive counteroffensive of Ukraine will be exactly against the Zaporozhye region. And the destruction of the bridge in Melitopol is just the beginning. We then also have the statement by Alexei Arestovich, who thinks that the liberation of Zaporozhye region will be much easier than the liberation of Kherson region. And one of the main reasons, according to him, is that Kherson region has much more water obstacles. And because of this, the enemy was able to build defensive constructions much easier, and at the same time the advancement of Ukrainian soldiers was a little bit slower than desired. But Zaporozhye, on the other hand, is relatively much more flat, which will basically mean that the execution of military strategies will be much easier. And just to once again reinforce the idea that Russians are most likely prepared to abandon both Kherson and Zaporozhye region in the near future, here we have the statement by one of the representatives of the Russian government, Irina Pankova. And what she basically said is that the full and the final integration of recently annexed territories of Ukraine into Russia will only be subject to Lugansk and Donetsk regions. And then she added that Russia will delay the inclusion of Kherson and Zaporozhye regions because allegedly they don't have enough prosecutors and judges to put on these territories. And I mean, wow, what a coincidence in timing, right? But anyways, sooner or later the next massive counteroffensive of Ukraine, as well as the grand withdrawal of Russians from the south, will most likely begin. And if you don't want to miss these events as soon as they start happening, just please once again subscribe to my channel, it only takes one click. And if you want to support my work, since I'm still demonetized and not getting anything from YouTube, please consider becoming my channel member, use the PayPal link, or become my Patreon, where you'll receive early access to the additional content. You can find all the other useful links to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow for the special episode.